All right.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to join. And hey, Jackie, I think we might be having a technical difficulty because we are seeing other participants in the screen. So you might want to check in on that. But as we figure that out, for those of you who haven't met us before, I'm Heather Farrell. I'm Burlington City Arts Curator and Director of Exhibitions. And we are thrilled to be having a virtual artist talk tonight with Libby Paloma and Christopher Terry. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Both artists are featured in our current exhibition, More Than an Object, The Contemporary Still Life, which is now on view at the BCA Center here in Burlington, Vermont. So Chris and Libby, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And this is kind of the few minutes before we start the official talk. And I just, this is where we say, how's the weather? What are you up to right now?
Well,
Oh
the weather in Rhode Island is spectacular today. It's a really beautiful day, not too terribly humid and
It
sunny.
looks incredible.
It does.
looks
I almost
so
feel like
nice.
there's an ocean back there behind you.
Yeah.
That's the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
How about you, Libby?
Yeah, here in Manhattan, I don't have a view quite like that, but no, it's really nice today. It's like, I think, turning into like actual fall. We had like 2 days where I was seeing like a meme that called it fake fall or something, and then it went into this crazy humidity, like nightmare of like a week. And then and I think we actually are squarely entering into fall now, and it's so nice. Yeah,
it is. And it's very similar here in Vermont, where it's very chill and then looking beautiful. And if you go out early in the morning and kind of look out, you can see Lake Champlain. So I kind of feel like we're bridging the views, between Jamestown and New York City.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh. Give my best to Vermont.
I will. We miss you, but we're so excited. We're going to talk about your new travels and and new projects here very soon. I want to give people just maybe 1 or 2 more minutes because you know how these virtual programs begin.
Yeah.
And I can say we have been busy here at Burlington City Arts. I have been with the fall. I have been booking tours like crazy to see the exhibition. We've got high school groups coming from Essex. We've got like special kind of partners that come in with the Bridges program, and then we also have just a couple of university groups coming as far as Middlebury College this past weekend to come and see the show, and which is wonderful. That's what we want to do. We almost, not quite normal, but we almost feel like we're getting to that normalcy again, where people feel like they can come in larger groups and visit the BCA. Not to mention schools in session here. For those of you who aren't familiar, Burlington, Vermont, we've got UVM, and UVM classes are starting to inquire and to come down. So we still have, I think, almost like 3 or 4 weeks left to see the show. Yeah. Perfect timing to invite you both here and do an artist talk tonight.
Great. So excited. Thank you.
Oh, of course. And I think with that, maybe I'll go ahead and begin, and hopefully people will kind of join as we go along. And so for anyone who is joining late, my name is Heather Ferrell. I am the Curator and Director of Exhibitions at Burlington City Arts, and thrilled tonight to be here with Libby Paloma and Christopher Terry. Both artists are included in our current exhibition, More Than an Object, The Contemporary Still Life, now on view at BCA. And so welcome everyone. And I'd like to share a few notes on the program format before we begin. It's always kind of helpful. So after my introductions, Libby and then Chris will share a brief presentation on the evolution of their work and some of the ideas that inform their creative process leading up to work featured in the show, as well as even the most recent projects. Following their presentations, we will open up the program to questions from you, our audience, as well as questions the artists and curator may have for one another. Please use the Zoom Q&A feature to pose your questions for each artist or for both artists, and we will answer following the end of both presentations. There's a chat feature if you want to share a comment as we go along. A reminder that today's webinar is recorded and will be posted on our BCA YouTube channel. More Than an Object, the contemporary still life explores the vitality and inventiveness of the still life tradition, presenting a multiplicity of innovative approaches and media, including painting, photography, animation, and sculpture. Still lifes are being continuously reimagined by contemporary artists who use the genre to explore the personal, the metaphoric, the social, and the unconventional. More Than an Object features 9 contemporary artists who exemplify how the genre remains a popular as well as an essential expression of our daily lives. In addition to the work of Libby and Chris, the exhibit features art by Susan Abbott, Christina Arrives, Una Gardner, Ori Gersh, Mike Pelletier, William Ransom, and Zachary P. Stevens. We are also happy to announce that we have a beautifully designed catalog. I have to have my curator moment, everyone. Just arrived here that features all of the artists here in the show. And we're so thrilled to be able to offer it. And I think Jackie can put our wonderful curatorial assistant behind the Zoom screen can put up in the chat. You can email if you'd like to order one. We also have them here on site, and they're literally hot off the press. And we're so excited to share that tonight with all of you. So it has been a pleasure working with Libby and Chris this past year as we organized More Than an Object. And before they begin their presentations, I'd like to share a brief bio for each of them. Let's begin with Libby. Libby Paloma is an interdisciplinary artist originally from San Francisco, California, and a recent resident of Burlington, Vermont, before moving this past summer to New York, where she is studying fine arts in the graduate program at Parsons, the new school. Libby's work has been exhibited at El Museo del Barrio in New York, SOM Arts in San Francisco, Space Gallery in Portland, Maine, Gary Contemporary in Millerton, New York, and the Dorsky Museum in New Paltz, New York, where she received the 2019 Hudson Valley Artist Purchase Award. Libby has also been an artist in residence at the Vermont Studio Center here in Johnson and the Wassaic Project in Wassaic, New York, as well as Space Gallery in Portland, Maine. Libby debuted new sculptural work this past summer, commissioned by both the BCA Center, as well as the Wassaic Project, and as well as the new collaborative performance at the Gary Contemporary. This weekend, Libby will be a panelist at the International Visual Sociology Association, or IVSA's conference, discussing her assemblage project, Lo que no sabrías, What You Wouldn't Know. Select works from the series will be shown in an online visual studies exhibition, What is an Image? Christopher Terry is a painter based in Jamestown, Rhode Island, who employs an impressive command of light and color to create his iconic still life interiors. Chris's paintings have been shown at Cadell Brooks Gallery in Charlotte, North Carolina, Pryor Fine Arts in Atlanta, Georgia, the Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art, Logan, Utah, Marshall Arts Gallery, Scottsdale, Arizona, and Art Prov Gallery in Providence, Rhode Island. Currently, Chris has a solo exhibit at Block Island Airport Gallery at the Rhode Island State Council on the Art, and is featured in a group exhibit at Viridian Gallery in Chelsea, New York, now as well as later in October. Chris is the recipient of numerous awards as a painter, including the Utah Visual Artist Fellowship and a Westaff NEA Fellowship in Painting. He has twice been the recipient of a Fulbright Fellowship for Teaching and Research in Germany, and in 2000 was a visiting artist at the American Academy in Rome. He taught at Utah State University in Logan for 31 years before retiring and moving to Jamestown. So thank you both for joining us today, Libby and Chris. And I'd like to begin by turning the time over to Libby.
Great. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I need to get screen sharing, kept the disabling host part off. That was, let me try again. Okay, perfect. Screen share. Now I'm seeing BCA screen. And I still, yeah, and I still don't have the ability to share my screen. We'll see.
Thank you for bearing with us for a few technical difficulties. And you know, Chris, if you could mute and turn off your screen as well until your presentation.
Okay, great. I am almost there. Okay. Okay, great. I'll go ahead and start, and just Heather, jump on in if you know something goes haywire and you can't hear me or something. Please just let me know. Okay, so hi again. My name is Libby Paloma. My pronouns are she, her. I first wanted to thank the hardworking people at Burlington City Arts, BCA. It has been such an honor to work with you all on this exhibition. I'm so thankful to have had this opportunity. Special thanks to Heather, Jacqueline, and the gallery staff who have been instrumental in my vision coming to fruition. So big thanks. It's been my pleasure. Yes, so I'm excited to tell you all about some of my recent and ongoing projects that give you a sense of who I am as an artist. My interdisciplinary practice draws conceptually and materially from parts of my identity as a mixed Latinx, queer, neurodivergent femme queen. And let me go ahead and show you. This is a project that I started in 2017. It's an assemblage project that is called Lo que no sabrías, what you wouldn't know. At the center of these assemblages are portraits of my Mexican and Mexican-American family members to translate my familial diasporic narratives as I understand them and their complexities through found and made objects, as well as intricate beadwork. Each bead that you see, here's a detail shot here, is applied with the point of a nail, one by one. So this portrait intervention project started in response to the derogatory and openly racist rhetoric being repeatedly and widely circulated by the previous US president and Republican administration and conservative media outlets about Mexican immigrants and Mexican American people at large. Although this has happened repeatedly since the early 1900s. I made assemblages of myself as well. This is a cover of a local magazine, La Voz, in the Hudson Valley. I was lucky enough to get on the cover. My work was. So I made 2 assemblages of myself as well. I dressed in the attire I wore in the 90s in this piece, and my drag persona, and he's called Nacho. I adorned my portrait, and in doing so, this is an act of self-love and compassion for my younger self and my artistic self, both of whom continue to heal deep ancestral wounds. I would add to these pieces that I'm also here exploring my mixed racial identity and my queerness. This project has been shown in multiple exhibitions since I started. And again, it's shown virtually, and I'm talking about it. It's shown virtually this weekend, and I'm showing, and I'm on a panel discussing it. So this project is wonderfully, people are engaging with it in wonderful ways, and I'm really proud of it. And then, so speaking of Nacho, here are some pictures over the years. So I did this performance project, a drag performance project that spanned over 15 years, with my last performance at the Samuel Dorsey Museum in 2020 in New Paltz, New York. The performances began in the drag tradition in the queer nightlife, scene in San Francisco in the early 2000s, using lip sync, later initially lip sync, and then sort of later expanding into these long form comedic shows that challenges notions of the binary, toxic masculinity, and he used, in the longer form works, he used poetry, humor, and a variety of tiny instruments, actually. And then there's this project that I call Por Videx, and it's a collaborative, ongoing project. So actually, my collaborative partner and I call it Por Videx. It's an installation project with scholar and artist Ace Lehner. This installation project seeks to artistically reinterpret the altar. Por Videx's altars make use of traditional and non-traditional, found and handmade objects to engage with the beauty of grief and remembrance, utilizing the dedication of craft technique and sculpture. In this project, reinterpreting the altar through the use of craft in unexpected ways, with the mix of soft sculpture offerings, found items, and household items, create something uniquely unidentifiable and familiar all at the same time. So this was an altar that was commissioned by El Museo del Barrio for Dia de los Muertos. And so there was this wonderful, and it was in 2020, so it was a really tough time for people that year, especially. And so there were quite a lot of visitors to this altar, and because it was right in the middle of the pandemic, we couldn't, at the time, we couldn't have people leave sort of your traditional offerings. And so people had handwritten notes and photos that they attached to the panels there on the side, and the community interaction was really beautiful and meaningful, and we called that piece Sweet Blue. The next project I'd like to talk about is called Fertile Ground and New Growth, Dreaming in the Plant Realm. And it was inspired in 2021 while I was recovering from my own chronic illness exacerbated by long COVID. An integral part of my recovery process was the direct engagement with nature and its restorative qualities. And looking into plant resilience further, I discovered that the most resilient plants are native plants to any given area, some of which have some medicinal qualities. The plants featured in this installation, there's a different view of it, are native plants from 2 geographic locations of making in residency in the Hudson Valley, New York, and finally installing in the window gallery at Space in Portland, Maine in the winter of 2021. So this this summer, the soft sculpture ecosystem was then, oh, sorry, let me back up and show you. All right, side panel, sort of looking in to the side of the installation. It was about 18 feet long. And it was large enough so that I could do a few pop-up performances. So I did this performance wherein myself and my Chihuahua, who's actually right next to me, I'm sure she'll make an artist talk appearance of her own, of course, at some point. We dressed up as bees and pollinated the installation. So again, in the spirit of collaboration, we enjoyed and danced around in this soft sculpture world. So this soft sculpture installation continues to grow and evolve. This summer, the soft sculpture ecosystem was installed at the Wasaic Project Summer Exhibition that just closed last week. It's ever changing and it has a new title called Gorgeous Just About Anywhere. And this soft sculpture garden continues to evolve, like I said, and just as the healing body evolves. Bluebells, St. John's wort, and baby turkey tail mushrooms have blossomed for this show. And now I'd love to talk about Still Living With. So this is the installation that is in the Still Life show at BCA. Again, thank you so much. So this is a life-size soft sculpture installation, which includes over 40 soft sculptures made from upcycled fabric, some of which I use, from my own clothing that, I don't need anymore. Some of it is donated fabric. Yeah, so the fabric kind of comes from a lot of different places in my life. And the sculptures are sewn and stuffed to emulate my living room couch view, actually this couch. And so many of the objects hold personal, meaning and significance, sort of symbolizing some aspects of my daily life and creative practice to sort of highlight how objects and their materiality can define our social and cultural identity. I want to say that some of that I took from the wall text because it's that you all did such a great job of really bringing together my ideas there. I want to say too that nourishment is at the heart of my soft sculpture installation. The urge to nourish the body and spirit, the viewers and the artists alike, with an offering of, let me show you, moving on. Here's the view from a rug that I made. And I offer the visitors to the installation to sit or lie down on the rug and enjoy this plate of food in whatever way that you like. It's an urge to nourish, like I said, the body, the spirit, with an offer for a gentler and softer version of the world for those of us who need that kind of respite. There's a close-up of the soft sculpture bike. Some of the items on the shelf, soft sculpture shelf. There's a little bit of humor in here too. This is like says H2O Bubs rather than like some kind of company that we know of. This is nut butter. you know, then there's like, it's, you know, there's like this sort of playfulness with leftover food, like someone has been there enjoying this world already, and you as a visitor are stepping in, and here's some random people, just kidding, who are showing us how one can enjoy the space, the installation. And so lastly, Trying to Stay Cool is a performance I did a couple of weeks ago at Geary Contemporary in Millerton with my sometimes collaborator, artist, and scholar, Ace Lehner. This collaborative performance is grappling with the tensions and layered cognitive processes that we face as we seek to live with the looming climate crisis that is ever present. With some humor and joy, our performance asks the question, how do we in fact stay cool in our complex reality? Well, that's it for me, and I'll turn it over to Christopher Terry now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Libby. I'm starting my video, and I believe that I need to share my screen now. And let's see, that's here. And I will start the show. So before I get started talking about myself as an artist, and I want to talk a little bit about the process that I use. I want to talk about some influence I've had, but I also want to begin by thanking Burlington City Arts, the entire staff there, Heather Ferrell, the curator, for putting this show together. I think it's a really fabulous exhibition. I really appreciate the diversity of people included. And of course, the show is really beautifully hung and lit, and we, the artists, really appreciate that. So thank you very much. Most of us do not really like to define ourselves too narrowly. I think that it's pretty common for artists and other people as well to avoid being put into a box and thought about as being this kind of person or that kind of person, and I'm no different. But I also know that this is a thing that people desire you to do, and so we're constantly asked to make statements about our work that reduce it to a sentence or a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs. And so I've done that a great deal. And I will make an attempt to try to describe who I am as an artist for the purposes of this talk. And I would say that I'm an artist who is really interested in the tension that exists between the quotidian and the mystical, the everyday life, and then those things that are going on behind that everyday life that are not really, we can't really grasp them in any really firm way. And so I'm continually making images that combine very everyday kinds of objects, but presenting them in ways where I control light, I control color, I control all the different aspects of the painting in order to try to create some tension, the expectation that maybe something is going on other than what's on the surface. Here's an example of one of those paintings. I think this is a painting that really very much presents that particular theme. It's an oil painting on canvas, 40 by 34, as you can see here on the screen. And I consider this to be an image that really summarizes my main concerns and my main interests as an artist. Now, one of the reasons that we always avoid defining ourselves too narrowly is that there's, of course, a lot more going on than just that. So when I talk about my interest in the tension between the everyday and the spiritual, I really am only talking about content at that point, what the paintings are about. But there's so much more that goes on for every artist. We're all excited about materials, we're excited about color, we're excited about shape. So there's a whole series of formal things that might be happening. And of course, we all love the process that we work with, or we wouldn't be doing it. So the process is really exciting to me. It's very much a process of discovery, and I'll show some examples of that later on. I didn't begin as a still life artist, as an artist that dealt with still life subject matter, but instead I was really much more interested in the figure as I got started in my career. So I've chosen one painting that goes back a very long way to kind of give you a hint of that. Over time, I found that still life subject matter provided me with a really very, very flexible matrix within which I could address the things that really interested me. And I found that the figure tended to make the paintings move in a much more narrative direction that I wanted to avoid. I wanted a more open-ended narrative, or maybe a narrative that really was not a narrative at all. So I began interested more with the figure, but you can see that even in this painting here, where we've got a figure and a kind of a more narrative situation, the similar kinds of subject matter is present that we see in my later work. And this is a much more current piece, and changes that have occurred are not just about the fact that there's no figures anymore in the paintings, but of course, over time, I think my work has become a lot more minimalist. It's become quieter. It's become more controlled, more analytical, and less emotional, I guess. And here's another example of work in that direction. So one of the things that Libby mentioned, and she showed an example of a piece that I think she called Por Videx, and it was essentially an altar. And the still life subject matter really lends itself very well to that situation. And so a lot of my paintings can very readily be seen as an altar. I think it's kind of a secular altar. They're not necessarily religious images at all, but they are objects that are presented in a way that draws on the same kind of mechanism that the altar uses to focus the attention of the viewer in a very specific place and to elevate the objects that are placed on that altar and have people consider them in ways that they wouldn't consider them if they saw them, for example, on a shelf in a grocery store, and you saw a whole bunch of objects like this, you wouldn't think about them in the same way. So I'm using that altar-like structure that you see in Libby's work as well, and that is pretty prevalent throughout a lot of still life work. A lot of my paintings include interior spaces, and I would say that the majority of them do, but sometimes I really find ideas that are better addressed in this kind of really standard still life subject matter presentation, where objects are really seen without much going on around them. And this is an interesting example of that, one that I really enjoy. And another thing that has crept into my work over time is the landscape. And Heather mentioned at the beginning that I do have an exhibition of purely landscape paintings that are up right now here in Rhode Island. But I've actually been kind of squeezing the landscape in through this window, this open window, for some time now. I like the idea of the window as entry into another space. So the viewer perceives that they're in one place, but then there's an opening to another one that is usually kind of concealed. It's not, we don't really see a lot of what's going on out there. It's just another way for me to address this idea of the mysterious, the enigmatic, and raise some curiosity about what might be going on in this other dimension as we move through a portal. In other paintings, it's not so much a window, it might be a mirror that provides this kind of entry into an alternative space, but it's a theme that comes up again and again in my work. And this is another example, and this is actually a distributor from interior combustion engine. If you've worked on an automobile, then you're probably familiar with this object. I was really intrigued by one of these and just found it to be a really interesting kind of sculptural form. And so decided to look at it as the subject of a still life painting that elevates it with the light and the setting to a plane that is not under the hood of an automobile, but instead asking people to look at it in a very different way. Now, one of the things that I think I should mention is, and I'll talk about this in a moment when we get into talking more about process, but I rarely work from this subject matter as you see it here. I have an automobile distributor. I did look at that, and I used it as a way of examining the subject matter. So I do observational painting, but most of what we see here is invented. So that table that this sits on does not exist. The room in which we are in the painting is a made-up interior, as well as that stuff that's on the wall behind the distributor. So if I talk a little bit about artists that have influenced me, I certainly have to mention Kurt Schritters. I really like the way that he uses found objects, objects that have been overlooked and even discarded by society, and puts them together in these really curious configurations that just make me wonder what is going on here. And that's a thing that I admire about Kurt Schritter's work. I'm very influenced by Joseph Albers and everything that he did with color. These are some studies of his that he made, preparatory to his homage to the square paintings. No still life artist working today can ignore the work of Giorgio Morandi. He's a really important influence for me, and I was just, if you're not familiar with his work and you're seeing it for the first time here on this screen, you might be thinking that it's pretty dull stuff. There's really not much going on here, but the reason that you might feel that way is that you must see these paintings in person. And when you do, it opens up a lot of subtlety that does not come across in reproduction. And I saw an exhibition of his work many, many years ago and was really taken by it. And he's influenced me to a very large extent. And of course, Joseph Cornell, who is the king of the enigmatic. And he just finds essentially still life objects. He doesn't make images of them. He presents them in a tableau, a shadow box, and creates these very enigmatic kinds of narratives with them. So I want to talk a little about process. And I mentioned that a lot of stuff is invented, but I also will find objects. So here I'm describing a table that I found, and I wanted to know more about it. So made a pretty detailed drawing and made some notes about it. But I often work on graph paper in order to plan out images. And here's an example of a painting. This is a painting that's actually in the exhibition. It's called Shrouded Bust. And this is that painting when it first started. So very, very high intensity, really transparent paint. If you are familiar with the painting, you can see that a number of things have changed as the painting developed. And that is always the case with my work. the paintings always take me in directions that I didn't necessarily anticipate. And it's one of the things that I like about being an artist. If the development of a painting was a completely linear process, I don't think I'd find this very interesting anymore. I'd find something else to do. This is another image that is coming right out of the show, Still Life with Yellow Teapot. Fairly recent work that I think is a good example of a lot of the themes that I'm interested in. And then these last images here are just very current work, things that I've done just this past year for the most part, and exploring more of still life subject matter in a variety of different ways. This painting here uses a certain amount of artificial light, which is not a thing I do a lot, but this was kind of intriguing to me. So I was kind of trying to see what that would do. And here we've got a number of different things that kind of fit into that theme, the idea of the window, but in this case, the window is covered over. I basically like the idea of the things being covered. I mean, I could present these tables without this tablecloth, but the tablecloth is like kind of a shroud that hides something that I like to think that the viewer might be very curious about what's going on behind that. So this is the last image. And I guess I will now turn this back over to Heather and let her continue. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both, Libby and Chris. And you could tell that this light has already been changing as we've been talking. Wonderful to learn more about your work and your process and the evolution of your ideas. And I'd like to invite everyone, I know it's sometimes you're shy or quiet out there, but to pose a question to our artists here today, or make a comment. And I'm very happy to start it off if you all are. Just also with a reminder that for those maybe who are just joining or joining late, the webinar is recorded and will be posted on our BCA website. And any question is wonderful. We love to think of these as conversations as well as just a talk or presentation. And that includes our artists. So if you have questions for each other, but why don't I start? Because I find it really interesting, as the curator of the show and an art historian, the idea of the still life, this very humble subject, and yet it's persisted thousands of years. And it's continually being reinvented, although we think we know what it is. I love the idea of challenging kind of a new notion. And so with that, I'm curious to hear from both of you if anything changed in the perception of your work when it was put within the context of the show. Because I know I had different conversations with each of you, but to say, oh, here we're going to take this and we're doing a still life exhibition. And so I just love to hear any insights from you, Libby and Chris.
Okay. Libby, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say that it was a big challenge for me. I was up for it. I was excited about it. I don't think I ever considered that I would I will say I don't think I considered still life like my, how do I say this without like, okay, I want to back up a tiny bit and say that I'm fairly, I don't have like a huge fine arts educational background. I actually come to fine arts a little bit as, I would say, like an outsider but not unwelcome at all. I mean, every place that I've shown in has been wonderful, and there's like it's been very inviting on my, from my end. But I will say that I don't have like an extensive like fine arts education. And like actually this being in at Parsons is the first time that I really am stepping in to this fine arts education. I have a master's in science. I had like a completely different professional life for many years before. So I'm sort of like in new waters. And that being said, I'm like this, and I'm a student of fine arts, like in the literal sense, but also in that I'm just sort of like really like getting a great real life understanding of this vast history, this, and that being said, I didn't, as like a layman, I would say I wasn't very thrilled about still life, just as like a genre. To be perfectly honest, it wasn't something that I considered to be the most exciting. And now I'm actually really excited about it. I think that there's actually a whole lot there, especially in the idea of really pushing the limits of what that can really mean, in asking a soft sculptor like me to put my spin on the still life, and
don't
sort
forget,
of pushing the limits.
Performative artist, large scale.
Yeah.
I just have to interject here.
Please,
For everyone, when I first met Libby, I was like, yes, I've been stalking her through her exhibitions.
Thank you.
And I thought, because the whole idea is that it's this genre that kind of gets overlooked, and it's got a stereotype about it. Yet there's all these exciting, amazing things that I think people don't really realize. Is it a still life? Are genres even relevant? That's probably my next question. But what was exciting is how you could take it and literally blow it up, enlarge it, invite people into it.
Yeah. Put my spin on it. Bring a little humor into it. Like pump up the color, make it soft and floppy, make it fashion, make it, I think that I was really excited about the opportunity. And then, as like Chris was talking about his work, and in spending time with your paintings in the gallery, and sort of like with my work in the background, there's something playful about the relationship between our works too, and then the contemplative nature of your work, and the subtle play that's there too. I sort of I noticed. And are you thinking about are you thinking about your pieces as having like a little bit of humor? I mean, the idea that there's like a car part in this imaginary space on a sort of a countertop. There's something kind of playful about that. Am I right? Or
yeah, certainly, Libby. There's a playful aspect of it, and it's a very, very dry humor. And well, that's kind of the humor that I use under all circumstances. So yeah,
I appreciate dry humor. Right. That's great.
But when I think about still life, I think about the fact that there has been this hierarchy to the genres that comes down to us. It's a tradition that's more than 200 years old. And the really good artists, of course, would do history painting, and the ones that were a little bit less successful would have to do portraiture, and then beyond that there'd be landscape painting, and then there'd be animal painting, and finally you'd get down to people who were doing still life, and that was low. That was really the bottom of the totem pole. I've never really given that a lot of thought, but this exhibition has made me consider that. And I think that still life really had its heyday. It really came into ascendancy in the early modernist period, for the very same reason that I mentioned that I'm drawn to still life as a subject. And that is that it's such a flexible matrix to do the kinds of things that you want to do. And so artists like Picasso and Braque, when they developed Cubism, they certainly did landscape, they did figurative work, but the majority of that stuff was still life, because it opened up so many doors and allowed them to have freedom that those other genres did not. So I think it really came into its own at that period, but I can't imagine that there'll be a time in the future when it will not continue to be very important, because we do live in a time now where you can buy your identity and you do it online with the things that you own. It's all about, we live in a consumer society. And so objects are now more important than they have ever been before. And I think that the still life tradition is going to be strong in the future because of that.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things I was thinking about when I was putting the show together and looking at the different artists and artwork, that comprise the show, is this idea that objects, they kind of had a little bit of a heyday too with the pop art movement, but they are defining us. And if anything, this hierarchy that we're taught in school, I feel like with, interdisciplinary nature also of art and artists, is like, it's upended. If anything, their objects are being elevated, as you were saying. And Libby, as you were talking about, these are objects that also they talk about our identity. They talk about what we believe in. They talk about, the role of consumerism in society. They can talk about political unrest or racial histories, of food traditions. An object isn't an object anymore. And so I kind of see that hierarchy that I learned about for so long, just kind of flatlining out. And even as a curator, and you're telling people about this exciting idea, everyone's like, oh, a still life, let me think about that. But it's like, no, wait till you see, there's more.
But if one of the ways that you can prove, you can look around and see that you're absolutely right. When's the last time you saw an exhibition of history painting? It just doesn't exist. It's used, there are artists that are using it, like Mark Tansey, and uses it as a kind of a parody, but I can't think of anybody that's doing history painting anymore. It's over.
Yeah, well, and I think you remember, history had this validity. Like, if you saw it painted, that's how it was.
Yeah.
So we don't believe that anymore as a society. We don't believe what we necessarily see on television. There's so many viewpoints, but an object somehow, if you can get it on Amazon, or if it's in your living room, it has this intrinsic truth to it, maybe. But I have a question from one of our participants, Emmeline Miller. And it's a question for Libby. She says, I was wondering how old you were, or how long ago you began experimenting with soft sculpture as your art form. I have never seen anything like it, and I was super intrigued by it when I saw Still Life With, which is the title of your piece at BCA. I really enjoyed how different it was from the typical art that is shown in galleries and museums. Speaking of hierarchies, would you like to address that?
Oh, wow. This is a really great question. I'm going to pull it up so I can be sure to see if I can focus. Okay. So I want to say actually that, sewing is a skill that I learned very young. It was actually, as a child, I was taught how to make corn husk dolls, and I sewed little tiny dresses and stuff for my corn husk dolls. And that I remember being like one of the first things that I made that I like had for a while, and it became like a skill. Like I can make corn husk dolls and clothes for them, like, you know, out of these materials. Anyway, so I would say that my sewing started just needle and thread pretty young, but then I ended up starting to sew my own clothes and modify my clothes in the 90s as just like a middle schooler. So like my craft kind of goes back, you know, but and that's when I started to use a sewing machine. I used my mom's sewing machine, and then, you know, I continued to sew, and but the soft sculpture, so I had that skill set and utilized it in my sort of everyday, like making clothing, modifying clothing. But it's actually very recent that I think my first large soft sculpture piece was in 2019. And it's on my website. It's like the right hemisphere of my brain. So sort of like bringing together some of the neurology and neurolinguistics that I learned in my previous profession as a speech language pathologist, and this entry point in soft sculpture. So I would say that it's been only like a few years that I've been working in soft sculpture, but the craft of the skill set goes back. So it gets pretty technical if you like get close, you know, to the pieces. Shoot, I don't see the question anymore. I hope I answered enough.
No, you did. And,
okay.
and I think, you know, to remind everyone, if you have a chance to visit in person, that you allow people to get close.
Yes, yes. I want you to.
Installation, like you can sit within it and really gaze at it.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting to see if anyone else has a question. I know we're getting toward the end, but I might throw one out there because I love to talk about these big abstract ideas, because the still life is so often too associated with this idea of illusion and with realism or truth. And I'm just kind of curious, in both of your practices, if you think about that at all, besides color and light, or upcycling and kind of the relevance of objects, like truth, realism, illusion. Does that play into your practice at all? Because it's so much a part of the still life tradition.
I can answer, Heather, and yes, very definitely. You know, realism is a word that I don't like at all. I've never appreciated that. And I think it's pretty interesting that you make these paintings and all I'm thinking about is illusion. And then people call me a realist. So that seems always kind of backwards to me. And I know that there's so much information that is visible. I mean, our eyes take in information. We could measure it with megabytes or gigabytes. And the artist, no matter who that artist is, if they're doing anything with observation and making a representational image, they're using a teeny tiny percent of all that information that's available. And you can use all different kinds of teeny tiny percents and make very, very different representational paintings that are all convincing and look very, very different. So I think about that particular thing a lot. I know that there are lots of artists that deal with subject matter not unlike the kind of work that I do, and their work looks completely different than mine. And that seems to me like a pretty exciting thing, and a thing that makes this worth doing for me.
Interesting. How about you, Libby?
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, so there's like the truth that we think we're seeing with like our eyeballs, and the like literal perception that we're seeing with like light and color, with our like the cones in our eyes, what's visible to us, and like I think about the literal sense of it, in that even that is like different from person to person. And then so there's like that literal like physical sense of it, and how different that can be from person to person based on their own bodies, everyone's bodies, and then the complexity of like the cultural situatedness that we all, and the differences that we all come from, where culturally we're situated, where culturally we have been, and how these things come together or don't, or then there's like this way that each of us are, and our situatedness and our bodies bring us to our personal place of truth. And I think that's what I explore in my soft sculptures, my assemblages, my performance, is like actually this urge to bring together my personal truth, which is like, as you can see, pretty colorful, pretty like vibrant, pretty energetic, and then also maybe my truth, which may not be as visible to some people, that I have this mixed racial heritage, that I have, that I'm queer, that, I'm neurodiverse, I have learning disabilities, I have, I have limitations with my body sometimes, so there's this like, there's like these layers, and like, I can't always make my personal truth known in the literal sense, in the body sense, and in this, with my work, I can break it open a little more, and then explore it, and also share it, maybe even better than with my words, so yeah, I think about
Well, I love how you're like the contrast of these different insights here, and it's something as a curator I really value, but also it's the role of what I'm trying to do with a show like this is that these are terms that we use. And I sometimes feel they're so last 200 years ago, Chris. But they're terms we use today and how we perceive the world. And so I like with the visitors or the viewer, I'm always hoping to kind of open up their perception of the world, looking through the artist's eyes, through their eyes, questioning all of these notions of, well, what's realistic, what's illusion, what's an object, what's this or that or the other, and how that perception can change. And I think both in each of your ways, you've illustrated that it's, still life, it's just a launch point to talk about larger ideas. And so I love that. Oh, I have, one more comment, and then we probably should wrap up. This is from Leah Sepfin, and they ask, Libby, sitting on the rug and playing with the food on the plate was something I have never done with an art installation before, and something that I never thought that I would be invited to do in a gallery. Do you think the way in which this challenges the alienation of the art and the viewer that is ever present in the institution of the museum is related at all to your queer identity?
Oh, wow. What a what a question. This is a good one. It's layered. So so I think, well, what I would say is that I think you're noticing something there. And actually, I would say that I don't feel alienated anymore. Now that I actually, with this work, it's like my urge to like invite and invite, yeah, like everyone in. So, which is part of like the excitement around the plate and the offering of the rug, and you know, the BCA staff being there to facilitate, you know, the like offering of the food and the place to sit or lie down. It is probably, I think, pushing limits of what we have seen sort of like historically in a lot of gallery spaces. I think it's pushing, and so this is where I'm like so excited that Heather is the kind of curator that, you know, you are, is that you're also excited to push limits of what has been done, but also like what some of us want and I want more of, which is this this place of maybe excitement, maybe interaction, maybe joy, and also maybe inclusion of queer identity, of you know, disability, of neurodivergence, of you know, Latinx, like mixed, all kinds of, and a mixture thereof, or whatever, you know. So like there's this wonderful, yeah, so I would say that I am pushing the limits, but I'm also saying let's do this, you know, let's mix it up. Yeah.
I feel like you're inviting everyone to join you in pushing
Yes.
against that limit and
Yes.
and making it very accessible. And that and it's been such a great conversation, but I think we'll probably have to end here before we go to credits. But just to summarize that in the exhibition, hopefully there's a work or an artist or many work and artists that people can relate to and kind of perceive the world or reconsider or think about even the objects in their daily lives and what they can say about, you know, bigger things in their own personal world, their personal identity, or the larger world. And you both, all of the artists, but you both too have especially done such a great job. And thank you. And thank you, everyone. And just to be respectful of everyone's time, we're so glad to have you here on a Thursday evening. And I'd just like to end with a few thank yous. So first, thank you again very much, Libby and Chris, for joining BCA and the Vermont community here to talk about your work. I'd also like to thank Jackie O'Brien, our webinar extraordinaire staff behind our Zoom screen, for getting us going tonight. Thank you.
Yay.
Yay, as well as the BCA communication team for promoting and supporting our program. And then again, a special thanks to Ted Olson, our amazing designer art director, for helping us get this beautiful and striking catalog together for the show and to share it with the artists in their communities. More Than an Object is sponsored in part by the Maslow Family Foundation and Lunig's Bistro and Cafe. Our hospitality sponsors include Lake Champlain Chocolates, Farrell Distributing, and Prophecy Wines. We are thrilled to have the continued support of Mascoma Bank, our presenters of the 2022 Year of Exhibitions, as well as the New England Foundation for the Arts through the New England Arts Resilience Fund, the NEA, and the Vermont Arts Council, as well as all the staff of BCA. It's a great team. We all work together to bring you programs, events, and really connect the community to art and relevant ideas. If you have not had a chance to see the exhibition in person, More Than an Object, The Contemporary Still Life is on view at BCA Center through Sunday, October 9th. And if you can't make it to Burlington, you can view it through our website virtual tour. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you again, Libby and Chris, and hopefully
Thank you so
we'll
much.
see you soon. Good night, everyone.